To watch the World Championships of powerlifting, do you?
Yeah, I do.
You have to.
Listen, I don't review or say anything about you going to watch Chelsea women's games. Let me enjoy my sports.
I mean, it's not very woke of you, is it, to be watching powerlifting?
How is it unwoke to watch powerlifting? Women compete in powerlifting as well.
So you say.
Okay, I'm going to send you the link, and it's on at 3:30, and you can watch those. Very welcome to Beneath the Skin, the show.
I've got things to do.
I don't care. No, you don't. You spent the past half an hour being like, I have to do this thing later on. And okay, we're going to stop arguing. You're very welcome to Beneath the Skin, the show about the history of everything, told through the history of tattooing. And it's a very special edition of the episode. One of the very few episodes that we actually timed correctly to come out on the day it's supposed to. I am Thomas O'Mahony, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Matt Lauder.
I love you, Tom.
I love you too. On this day of love.
On this day of love.
We share the love between... And what is the better expression of love than genital tattooing?
Yeah. I was listening to an audiobook, which we will link and talk about in a second. And it had mention of a tattooer not wanting to tattoo someone's penis. And I thought that would make a great episode for Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
So we were really lucky as well to interview Berlin-based Spanish-born tattooer Adrimetric, who you will hear in an interview at the end of our chat. So he was in London. He makes a specialism of tattooing penises. And I around that conversation, I thought we could talk a bit about some of the history of not just penis tattooing, but also vulva tattooing as well. Because people, there's a lot of stuff going on underneath people's pants, Tom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like it's interesting because it's come up quite a lot in this show in general. Like, the 80s scene with like Mr. Sebastian in London, that there was like so many people who were like very heavily tattooed, but if they had their underpants on, you wouldn't know. And it's a symbolism of love. A lot of people get a heart with a name on their sleeve or these sort of things. What is more devotional than getting a tattoo on your genitals for the person you love?
Yeah, even if that person is yourself.
Yes, exactly. Well, there is no love without self-love.
So I guess, to start off with, and we're not talking about genital modification more broadly. Maybe trying to keep it tattoo themed and fairly short things. We've got the interview with Ad coming up as well, but it's worth mentioning, that humans have been messing around with their junks for about 5,000 to 7,000 years. In various ways. The earliest lines of evidence for things like circumcision on people with penises, and things like infibulation or excision, what gets called in the literature female genital modification or mutilation, also dates back to about 6,000 years ago in East Africa. It's difficult to evidentiary to pull out some evidence of these things. You have to look at, for example, carvings, and as Dr. Ellen Grunenbaum from Purdue University, who I was listening to speak about this yesterday, points out that circumcised and uncircumcised penises look the same when erect, more or less. So you can't really tell from a sculpture of an erect penis if it is circumcised. However, through various lines of evidence, which we haven't got time to go into, but people have been messing around with their genitals for a very long time.
Yeah, it's very hard for archaeologists to do hood checks.
Yeah, it's very, very, very hard indeed, for all kinds of reasons. But so we're going to talk just really about more recent stuff. particularly really the period post World War II, particularly when there's a kind of emergent kind of gay scene. Because as you might imagine, as we've talked a bit about before in our episode about Dr. Samuel Stewart, Phil Sparrow, tattooing on the genitals has been at least more documented in the gay scene. And, at a time when being gay was illegal or certainly kind of, taboo and frowned upon, getting visibly tattooed in a way that marks your sexuality would be potentially even dangerous, career ending, certainly kind of socially awkward. But in the privacy of your own home, in the privacy of your own underpants, there was nothing to stop you, proudly showing off your genital tattooing. So let's start off with Sammy. Listen,
And but as before we get into it, for anyone listening that is interested in the minutia of how these tattoos are applied, we talk about it in the interview at the end of the episode. So make sure to listen to the end of the episode.
Well, actually, maybe the first thing, maybe before we actually get something, maybe you should play now that clip from Good Time Charlie Cartwright. So, Charlie Cartwright, who you're going to hear now, basically one of the inventors, really pioneers of black and grey tattooing, working out of a studio called Good Time Charlie's in East LA in the 1960s and 70s, and like absolutely pioneering what became known as black and grey. In his audiobook, which is available on Bandcamp, which again we will link to in the show notes, he talks about one customer coming in with a strange request.
I remember once a high roller with a small entourage with him wanted a tattoo on his pecker, and I just declined, saying I like putting nice art on people. He said, everybody's got a price. I said, bring me a wheelbarrow full of gold and you'll push it right back to the door. You just met somebody who don't have a price. Pissed me off.
What do you make of that, Tom?
I mean, listen, if I don't really know why you would bring a full entourage in with you
for your quote unquote pecker tattoo. Yeah, was it? Have you got a price?
No, I don't. This is an interesting point in that I think that maybe we should explore a little bit, that like not every tattoo artist is going to do something like it's not like in terms of like the technical application of how to do it, probably not a huge amount of people know how to do it correctly, but for morally, like, face tattoos and hand tattoos, the dick is the final frontier.
Absolutely. I mean, and Ad talks about that in the interview, as you'll hear. And I think one of the reasons, for example, the two artists we'll be talking about mainly today, Sammy and Mrs. Sebastian, were kind of, doing this kind of stuff, is because no one else would. And if someone came into your studio and wanted this doing, you'd certainly in London get a referral. You get sent to go and see Mrs. Sebastian. So that said, right? So not commonly that people did this. However, in Sam Stewart's book, Bad Boys and Tough Tattoos, Samuel Stewart was tattooing in the 1950s in Chicago and then in Oakland, California. Although most tattooers wouldn't tattoo penises, the index of his book under P has penis, tattooing of, page 40, 50 to 51, 70, and 132. So there are 5 pages of penis tattoo information in this like roughly 200-page book. So I want to read you one of these because I think it's a good instinct. Right. One afternoon, an ugly, heavy-set little man, about 40 years old, came into the shop and looked around. After a bit of uncertainty, he asked me if I would tattoo any place. Such a request always referred to the genital region. I told him there was a minimal price for such jobs. Well, I've had a lot of work on me down here, he said, and made a vague hand movement around his crotch and would like to have some more. He stepped behind the screen and lowered his trousers. His whole groin and the regions on each side of his genitals, as well as the lower inner thighs, were covered with tattoos, busts of big-breasted women all looking towards the center. His penis was covered with over 30 small tattoos, stars, flowers, symbols, and along the top of it lay a poorly executed naked girl. I have one little space right here, he said, showing me the underside of his glands at the corona edge near the frenum. Quote, where I'd like to have a small flower. That's quite a lot of work you have, I said with a neutral inflection. Yeah, he said, sure proves I ain't queer. All of them girls. Oh, sure, I said. Lots of fun when you go to the whorehouse, he said. All the girls can't get over it. They lay it in their hand and holler, oh, Flo, come here. I want to show you something. A lot of fun, I said. I got out the slanted bench and laid him on it and started to apply the small flower. Tattooing a penis is extraordinarily difficult. Since the skin has to be taut to get the colour in, and since the penis is usually flaccid from subconscious fear, and because they seem to have a life of its own, trying to get back into the belly or wriggle from side to side when the needle approaches, I was not paying much attention to his state of tumescence, except I noted its growing rigidity. All of a sudden, he gasped and ejaculated. It startled me. I threw some tissues on him. Gee, Phil, he said, guess the old imagination was just working overtime. Well, I said, you might as well relax and enjoy it. After the orgasm, he was no longer interested in having the flower finished, but I went on anyway. It was very painful for him after the ejaculation. He was suffering a great deal, and his embarrassment was total. He mumbled a goodbye as soon as possible after paying me, and I never saw him again.
Do you know what? Finish the tattoo.
What a pro.
Yeah. But like it's interesting in that like it does talk about this intersection between like, you know, genital tattooing and, you know, sex and, you know, sexual delight. The two aren't necessarily completely overlapping circles, but there's a strong enough inference between the two.
Yeah, and you know, obviously Sammy, as a theorist of tattooing in his later life, like did kind of, having worked with Kinsey and having his own particular kind of sexual predilections towards tattooing, did really think that tattooing was primarily sexual in nature. And of course, for him it was, and for lots of his customers it was. And I think obviously if you're coming in to get your dick tattooed, and again, Ad talks about this very eloquently, it is going to be something that either the result for you is sexual, even if you don't find the process sexual, or in the case of some of Phil Sparrow's clients, and certainly some of Mr. Sebastian's clients, the actual process was deemed erotic. We're going to, at some point when we can sort the timing out, interview the guys from the Schwules Museum, the Gay Museum in Berlin, to talk about Albrecht Becker. And Becker as well also has a kind of really interesting engagement with the, you know, sexual excitement about the act of being tattooed, and certainly tattooing his genitals. But of course, you know, it's also just kind of, it's sexy, it's cute, it's kind of you know, you even if you're into the process in that way, you can show it off. I like this quote also from Sammy's book, where he talks about a tattooed man, this guy called Randy, who of course he's called Randy. Like, I don't think that pun works in American, does it? But so Randy is in the shop, and he's there while Kinsey is in the shop, sort of observing Phil Sparrow's tattooing. Randy pulled out all the old folklore stories about tattooing. I finally said, Randy, Dr. Kinsey here is a scientist. Cut the bullshit and tell him the real story. Randy looked sheepish. Guess you're right, Phil, he said, and after the talk was more realistic. Kinsey asked him questions about the percentage of sexual action tattoos, of which there was very little indeed. Randy exposed all his tattoos, and with urging, even gave his memorized and poorly pronounced carnival spiel when he was the tattooed man in circuses and country fairs. He even exposed the small faded butterfly which had been tattooed on his penis 30 years before. Kinsey says this was the first tattoo in such a place he'd seen. Why did you get it on your cock, he asked. Randy laughed, mostly as a gag, he said, because everyone seems to be really interested in that kind of tattoo, and partly for business reasons. They're sure going to remember you and your name if you've got a tattooed dong. Then they tell others and you get more business.
It's guerrilla marketing, you know. I'm sure it's effective in some way.
Yeah, maybe that's what we need to do for advertising the show.
Hey, listen, I've already gotten a tattoo because of this show. It's your turn next.
Not on my penis.
Get it on the balls.
On the balls. Okay, no. So I think that's super great, right? Because you have this really interesting homosexuality, right? So tattooing is intensively quite a homosocial practice anyway, like barely clothed men touching each other intimately, there is something very kind of profound about that. And even if it is funny as well as being sexy and delightful and intimate, right? My barber says to me that it's barbers are the only people really that you let touch your ears, other than your loved ones.
What about your optician?
Or yeah, maybe. But your tattooist is probably the only person other than a loved one or a piercer or a gynecologist, urologist that you let touch your genitals, right?
Depending on who you are.
Depending, unless you're Matt Gone, refer
Yeah.
to previous episode. So yeah, so it's this kind of thing is really interesting because it does sort of span these cultural contexts. In the UK, so the tattooer in the UK who we mentioned, Mr. Sebastian, was much more. His client base was much more focused on gay men. Sammy tattooed, he was a tattooer to the Hells Angels, some of whom, of course, were gay men as well. But Sammy wasn't just a tattooer to the gay community. Mr. Sebastian largely was really. He worked primarily on a gay male client base, and actually because he was doing tattooing in a way and in places where other tattooers in London wouldn't do, not just on the penis, but also on the anus, like tattooed people's buttholes. And that's something that he did not find the process of tattooing sexually exciting for him as a practitioner. Like, he wasn't turned on by tattooing people, but he certainly kind of enjoyed the company of tattooed men. In his portfolio at the Bishopsgate Institute, and we're going to do a whole series about him at some point later this year. But in his portfolio, which is now at the Bishopsgate Institute, on the back of some of the photos of tattooed genitals that he did, particularly of tattooed arseholes, he's written things like, "This was a beautiful arsehole. I wouldn't have coloured it in black, but it's what the customer wanted." So always a service industry, even when you're tattooing someone's asshole black. And which leads us nicely into this clip where Mr. Sebastian is being interviewed in the early 1980s. Actually, no, is it? I think it is in the early 1980s, where he is being interviewed. We think for a student project. The link will be put also in the show notes. The person who interviewed him put it on YouTube. Where
it's in 1987.
87. So straight out of the gate, the interviewer asks him a question, and yeah, you'll hear how Mr. Sebastian answers what is, for most tattooers, quite a kind of reasonable introductory question, but for Mr. Sebastian, gets us to some very strange places very quickly.
Could you tell me, first of all, what's the most unusual tattoo that you've ever been asked to do for someone?
That is a very difficult question. There's a polite answer and there's a slightly cheeky answer. I suppose the most unusual polite one is to put little tiny black dots all over somebody's head that was bald, but they wanted it to look as though it had been shaved, sort of putting a 5 o'clock shadow all over his head. I don't think I'm the first person ever to do that. I have seen photographs of somebody else who's got it, but it was pretty unusual, but it was also rather tedious after a while.
Yeah. So what's the cheeky answer?
Well, a gentleman appeared who had cut his dick open completely in 2 halves like a banana split and wanted the inside tattooing. It wasn't really totally successful because it was all scar tissue. Really, it's not every week you're going to get asked to do that. So that probably was the most unusual one, I should think.
It certainly sounds very unusual to me.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel about that, Tom.
From everything that I've learned about Mr. Sebastian, this sounds like the most him answer, just like very kind of like, oh, what an interesting question. And just like,
he's got such a gorgeous voice.
Yeah. And like, you could tell he kind of like found in his head, he was like, I'm gonna answer this as straight as possible because that's the way it's gonna freak this guy out.
Yeah, I don't know even if he's trying to freak people out because he is just a kind of beautifully measured, calm man. There's quite a lot of footage of him in various documentaries over the years, and his voice is also used on a throbbing gristle track. He has this beautiful mellifluous voice, and he is just a very calm man. He was an art teacher before he became a tattooer, but this and really his portfolio is very, very, very heavily stacked with genital tattooing, like huge amounts, as well as genital piercing. He pioneered this almost specialty of like wings or other shapes in the shape of wings, flames, or occasionally sort of tribal designs even around the penis, which would reflect and kind of imitate the fertility flying phalluses from Roman archaeology, where these winged phalluses were considered to be kind of fertility tokens.
Or even the one that I spotted when we were going through the archive in the Bishopsgate, like a full Celtic Pictish like knot design down someone's penis.
Yeah. So he would do these basically in this genital region in order to, draw attention to it, to make it look incredible, but to also have this very, very particular kind of shape. And he became known for that. I mean, his own tattoo of that kind was on the cover of Doug Malloy's book, The Art of Pierced Penises. And he became super, super known for these like penile wing tattoos. And yeah, did tons of them, and really, I think took it very seriously. And they are, some of them are hilarious. There are ones that are tattooed to look like dragons or lizards. There are ones that are tattooed fully in flames. There are ones that have other penises tattooed on them, which I think is hilarious. Like, what are you getting to do on your penis? A penis? Yeah, very kind of postmodern and meta. Some of them he would combine with piercing. So there's a great one of him with a tattooed man, like circus strongman weightlifter guy, whose barbell is a pierced barbell, which is super fun. And so clearly it's this mix, as you said, of like of sexuality, of desire, of display, but also of of humor, because let's face it, penises are funny. Well, mine is. I can't speak for yours, but
mine's very respectable and serious. But genital tattooing, it's also not just for penises. We should give
hashtag not just for penises.
Yeah, not just for sailors and not just for penises. We should talk about vulva tattooing.
So yeah. Like tattooing on queer women and on people with vulvas, vaginas more generally, like, is very, very understudied. That history is much more quiet in general. It's much more hidden away. Obviously, the kind of lesbian community in tattoo history is much less, a much less central part of the storytelling. And the only tattoo shop I've ever found which actively advertised to lesbians, for example, in the 1970s, was run by a guy called Larry. So of course,
come down to Larry's Labia Tattoo Emporium.
Yeah, in New Jersey, of all places. Oh, Joycey, hey, it's Larry. But yeah, so those stories are much less well documented, but of course they were undoubtedly happening. But so where we find documentation of tattooed vulva is basically in the photo albums of tattooers with tattooed wives, girlfriends, and photos that they'd been shared of other people with tattooed genitalia. So there was a kind of big photo sharing scene back into the 1920s and 30s, even certainly in the 50s and 60s, where images would be shared. Many of those would be quite saucy, quite pornographic, and therefore many of those would feature naked men, naked women, and often, or not even often, occasionally, those women would sport tattooed genitalia. The real prominent pioneer for this stuff is a woman called Ruth Ulrich from Bielefeld, who was the wife of a tattooer called Johann Hans Ulrich, tattooing up until the 1950s, basically. Members of Rudy and Helder's Tattoo Club of America. But Ruth was a proud member of what she called the Butterfly Club. And Ruth had her vulva tattooed with a butterfly. The shape of a vulva lends itself to that design. And in the photo albums of people like Les Scoos, Canadian tattooer Doc Forbes, and people in that circle, in that group of tattooers at the slightly kind of freakier, queerer end of the tattoo scene in the 70s, which we talked a bit about with Paul King when we last had him on, and we will get him on to finish that story when he's got time. The Butterfly Club, the tattooed butterfly genitalia, was a real sort of calling card. So, where those stories have histories, and you can find lots of tattooed images actually in the internet era and in pornography from the 90s onwards of women and other people with vulvas who have some tattooing on their genital regions. But like the real pioneer of this, and certainly as far as kind of being proud and sort of out about it as much as you could be, was Ruth Ulrich and her Butterfly Club. As a slight side to that, interestingly, back in 2011, this kind of art magazine coming out of like Russia and the kind of Russian contemporary art scene back then, called Garage Magazine, published by this oligarch's wife called Dasha Zhukova. I think she was married to, or at least kind of in a relationship with Roman Abramovich. Anyway, the first issue of that magazine, on the cover, had a design done by Damien Hirst of a butterfly tattooed on someone's vulva. And there was like a sticker on the cover of the magazine that you could kind of peel off and see the design.
So in reality, it was designed by someone else and not Damien Hirst, because Damien Hirst is a fucking charlatan.
Well, that's a subject for another podcast, but I mean that's not out of line with his practice. I mean, it actually refers that whole practice of getting artists to design tattoos that other tattooists would then design goes back to 2004 at least, with a project called Chime Soutine by a gallery in Hackney. Anyway, that's a slight diversion, but yeah. So even Hirst, Hack, or however you think about him, was tattooing, or was thinking about tattooing butterflies on genitalia. And of course, butterflies are a kind of theme that Hirst comes back to quite often. So yeah, it kind of works there. It's on a 23-year-old Londoner, or then 23-year-old Londoner, Shauna Taylor. The Guardian art critic, one of the Guardian art critics at the time, Amy Fleming, says, this is not just any butterfly, however. This is Damien Hirst's butterfly. Titled Butterfly Divided, it's one of a series of tattoos by famous artists, all men, including the Chapman brothers and Coons, inked onto volunteers. Hirst's canvas is a 23-year-old Londoner, Shauna Taylor. The works play on notions of who owns the art and what it's worth, while referencing tattooing's popularity reaching saturation point. Asked why she agreed to the tattoo, Taylor asked, "Not one single person can ever say they gave birth through a Damien Hirst piece of art. If I ever give birth." There you go.
Absolute fucking hacks. Like I hate Hirst and Jeff Koons more than I hate Banksy, but that's a story for another time.
Jake Chapman says in his interview about the Inks project, "I like the butterfly on the string. Shauna showed her tattoo while wearing a tampon."
So I think, is this where we go into our interview with Ad?
I think so. Yeah. So I think that's a good little quick overview for all you lovers out there. If you're Ad's in London often, he tattoos at Leather Lane, and he has a particular style tattooing penises. And yeah, I would really, really recommend, if anyone's considering this, he's one of the people who I think would be really interesting to get tattooed by. His work's amazing. His approach is really interesting, and I hope some of this historical context has helped make sense of what's going on today. So yeah, enjoy the interview.
Hey, are you enjoying the show? If you really like Beneath the Skin and you want to help support us, you can do so on Patreon. For little as £5 a month, you can help make this show possible, help us buy research materials. So if you like the show and you want to support us, consider kicking us a few quid a month. And you'll get everything from bonus episodes to Q&As, and you can even vote on what tattoo I'll get when we reach a certain subscriber count. Matt, have you got anything to say?
You should really definitely fund the Patreon, because tattoo history is massive, right? Deep, wide, complicated. We're covering some big hit topics on the main feed, but on the Patreon subscriber-only feed, we'll be getting into some really more interesting, niche, deep topics you don't want to miss out on. And honestly, the chance to kind of decide what Thomas gets on his body is probably just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Subscribe, chuck us a few quid. Don't miss out on the chance to ruin Thomas's body forever. So, yeah, I guess, like, first of all, like, introduce yourself. Like, tell us who you are, man. Existentially.
Existentially, just a human, no? Yeah, my name is Adrian. I'm from Barcelona. Yeah, I was born in 88.
A child.
Very good times very good year, very good times in Spain for that. Just been living from tattooing 10 years. Started from very, 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 very low.
So yeah, how did you start tattooing?
I started in very, very basic way, so I just ordered a machine to supply in Barcelona.
Yeah.
I was living in that time in Menorca, it's a little island in Barcelona. And I was living there, and in my house I didn't have even internet or nothing, so I just ordered it, get it in my house, and I just, without internet, nothing, just trying myself in my legs. And
had you like seen tattooed people around and thought that's something I want to do, or like?
Yeah, like that's since I was young.
Yeah.
Like my father, he's been working always all his life in jails. He's been the how to say,
like a warden,
the boss of like the biggest jail in Spain.
Amazing.
He's been rebuilding like jails in Central America, where is all these gangs and all this influence, and everything I've seen in my life is pictures with him and inmates and prisoners and people tattooed. That is the aesthetic that I like to have.
Yeah.
So
we talked to Julia Amigo about the history of tattooing in Spain, and of course, like Spanish tattooing is very different to tattooing in other parts in Europe because of the dictatorship, and of course, like Spanish tattooing is much more closely aligned to like criminal and gang tattooing than it is 100%. In France or Germany or 100%. Italy or Britain,
Yeah, in Spain, mostly the tattoos started in like for criminal people, more than souvenirs or like the classic American traditional tattoo arrived very, very, very late. And what arrived was like the influence of the jail tattoos in France to Spain, and of mostly like immigrants and
So you bought a machine, and then what? Tattooing your friends at school, and
I was not even in school. I was already like 25 years old, like 24 years old. Yeah, I always think that I started late. So yeah, I just got the machine. I did like a couple of things in my legs. Another friend from the island offered himself to do stuff, and slowly I was studying in that time some illustration degree. So there I was developing a little bit of style. So when I discovered tattoo, I just tried to mix it a little bit, everything, and started in 2014.
And I was going to ask as well, like someone who starts like a little bit later at 25, like what sort of artistic stuff were you doing before then?
Yeah. I started graphic design when I was 18, 19 in university. I did like 1 year, but I spent all that year in the bar.
I know that feeling. I did the same.
In the gardens, just chilling. And I mean, the problem is that for me, like from 10 to 20, 19, I played in the maximum like level of water polo. So I played water polo I played water polo for 12 years of my life, like first division, like playing like with national team. I played around, and that was my only thing in my head.
I was about to say you spent like 9 years just playing Call of Duty.
No. I play some that now since COVID.
Yeah.
Since the pandemic, that stick me a little bit, some Warzone stuff. And
So you're tattooing now at AKA in Berlin, and we were talking a bit before we started recording about John, who's founded that shop. How did you end up at AKA in Berlin?
yeah, I just moved from Barcelona. I've been in Barcelona working for 4 years, and I thought it was time to move to another place. In that time, I was with a woman that was living in Berlin, and I thought an opportunity I moved for love. First was
Classic story, man.
yeah. I moved for love, and after I just
Classic mistake.
True. So yeah, I just arrived to Berlin for love, and I had a studio there that won me from the beginning, and I went there, and Philippe from AKA that didn't time just after John passed, sadly, Philippe took the AKA, and talking with him, we met a little bit before, and we like each other, and we just arrived in the studio.
I mean, AKA has been known through John and through Philip, I suppose, as well, for this really quite progressive black work style, which we're going to talk about, which is the style you're working in too. Like, were you working in that kind of style before you came to AKA, or did your kind of artistic development kind of happen whilst you were there already?
What happened is that I had already this vision of doing this style of these straight lines or things like that, but everything I did in my life before was in paper and with Illustrator.
I mean, it really makes sense. You said you trained as a graphic designer, and because your work is very graphic.
Exactly. So that is what happened. It was a very natural evolution from graphic design to slowly. At the beginning was just taking graphic design things and putting them on the skin, but slowly you understand that tattoo is not that.
Yeah.
Because computers is one thing, papers is another, skin is another one. No?
Yeah. And like how actually this is something that we've talked about on the show, but like talking to someone with first-hand experience going from being an illustrator to a tattoo artist, how was actually that, transition of learning you can't just put a digital illustration on the skin? What was that like?
Well, at the beginning, if you don't have in Spain, the situation with the new generation of tattooers and these new styles in Spain, when I started, it was not open at all. So nobody gave me a chance. So I had to just slowly do it like privately.
Learning on your own.
Exactly. Yeah. Very small studio. So I didn't have nobody telling me, you should not do this in this way, or giving me nobody giving me any kind of a guide or anything. So it was very slow process. It took me like 4 years from when I started until I felt that what I was doing, it was a good translation from the graphic design that I started, from what I thought it was a good tattoo and something you can print on the skin.
And was it hard to find customers who wanted the kind of thing that you were doing as well?
The thing is that because it was very graphic and very cute, people was very close to it and very familiar. So in that times, people didn't have the knowledge that I even had because they don't have tattoos. So we were saying, like a client that doesn't know about tattoos and a tattooer that is tattooing clean. Yeah. Because at the end, the important is that this is a clean tattoo, even whatever you do, like the technique have to be clean.
I mean, you say that, man, but like, not everyone comes into the industry with that perspective.
No, that's
true. I think
true.
One of the things that, for me in my head, like determines or distinguishes AKA, for example, and like your work, is exactly that cleanliness, that precision of the line, which is so difficult to do. And you're just like, yeah, of course everyone wants to clean, but like, that's quite rare to have a nice sense of clean, unshaded line work.
I think tattoo as a craft, it needs this vibration of like this adrenaline of thinking like I can fuck it up. Yeah. If I do a tattoo that I can fuck it up and nobody will notice. I can fuck it up and I can cover up with some way that nobody will notice. You don't have this pressure of working towards the skin. You know what I mean? Like, for me, a straight line, if it's not a straight, I'm fucked.
The other tattooer who I've interviewed and spoken to who said exactly that was Duncan X, who has exactly the same perspective of like doing a straight line in solid black with no shading is the fucking hardest, most stressful, most beautiful thing to do.
That and a circle, yeah.
And a circle, yeah, as well. Yeah.
Or an infinite.
But like that transition into like working in Berlin, like Berlin as a city obviously has like both the reputation right now and historically as like being the most open city in Europe. And what is the worst thing you can say to a tattoo artist is like, do whatever you want. What do you want? Like, how, as someone who does a very specific style, do you find that the city is kind of in line with what you're doing? Or
100%.
Yeah.
I land in Berlin in the perfect time, in the perfect moment, and with the, I think so. It's, I kind of define my style like a traditional techno. Because it brings you to this techno vibe, and I think it's perfect.
You can feel it when you're there, actually, in Berlin.
Yeah.
So that brings us, I guess, more straightforwardly to the thing we wanted to talk to you today with your genital tattooing, which is something you've become known for. It's something you've advertised in London. You know, you advertise them as thumb tattoos, which I think is lovely.
Instagram needs to...
Exactly. But yeah, so how did that come about for you? I mean, I'm interested to talk to you about how it fits into the history of this practice, but how did this become something that you were doing and known for?
So everything starts in a moment where it was Berlin, of course.
Yeah, right.
In a place where it's Berlin, and in a moment where, I felt I was starting researching more again, like tattoos and jails, and I discovered that was something very common. And I'm, in the same time, a very sexual person. Yeah. Very sexual. And I always wanted to have something there, but never knew what. So I started with 4 dots.
On yourself?
On myself, yeah. So just 4 dots and see how the thing was going. See the feelings, But everything started, because it's a sexual place. I'm a sexual person. AKA is a very sexual studio. Very open sexually in any way.
I mean, very explicitly open and engaged in the kind of queerness.
So again, I think it was the right place, the right time, and in the same time that tattoo, it had an overdose of tattoo during many years. During 10 years, it's been an overdose of tattoo. I think it was a good moment to discover a new little like niche, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I think as well, like it has that interesting question of like doing genital tattoos. Like, one is both very intimate, but 2 is like very explicitly painful as well. And it's very interesting. You did it on yourself first.
It's not that painful.
Really?
It's incredible, like the opposite.
Okay.
Like people like things is not, and it heals super fast. Mm-hmm. Like it's a very like elastic skin, and it's very superficial.
Yeah.
Like the tattoos are very done, like very, very superficial, dot by dot. Mm-hmm. It's no lining.
Yeah.
So it's not painful. It's painful because it's a fucking tattoo.
But it's like, I think we're all familiar with, it's that picture of like the pain chart of tattoos on the body. Yeah. Every time I see it, it's like, this thing is the fucking bane of my life.
I mean, you have to know that like all the nerves, they go inside but through the gland. Everything is on the gland, focus on the gland. Everything else is just like muscles. Mm-hmm. At the end, where it hurts more...
Speak for yourself, mine's not that muscle.
Mine's doing bicep curls. I got a little dumbbell for it.
Mine looks like an old pit bull.
So, did you... What way around did the client-artist relationship... Because I guess now you're advertising it and people are coming to you for it, but did it start with other people coming to you and saying, hey, Ad, will you do this? Or were you, from the beginning, going, I want to do this... Who's up for it?
No, it was very spontaneous when I posted myself doing it. People offered themselves, and I'm a very open person too. So I said, why not? I mean, urologists and proctologists, they work in these parts and every day, and they make their life. No, I mean, right. At the end for me was trying to. I mean, at the end we have to pay our bills, And no, it's true, and we have to put sometimes in these designs I'm doing. There is no style. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just looking to make something beautiful in any way. I'm not looking. There is no my ego there.
Yeah.
My ego is in my style.
Yeah.
There is just try to make that part beautiful for anybody, however they want.
I think that's such a beautiful way of putting it, man. Like, it's funny. So, I was saying, I was listening to Charlie Cartwright, Good Time Charlie, reading his audiobook recently, and in that he recounts, someone coming to him and asking for a genital tattoo, and saying, how much would you charge? And Charlie said, no, I'm not doing it. And the guy said, oh, everyone's got a price. And Charlie said, no, my price is fuck off, like, get out of my shop. And I know for a long time in London, if anyone wanted any genital tattooing, they would refer them to Mr. Sebastian, who was tattooing in Mount Pleasant. Hilariously, there's an interview with Mr. Sebastian with I think a student radio journalist who says, what's the most painful tattoo? What's the weirdest tattoo you've ever done on someone? And Mr. Sebastian, with his beautiful voice, says, without missing a beat, I once tattooed the inside of someone's penis. And you can hear this interviewer go, that's not really what I was prepared for. I was not what I was expecting. But do you find that like people are coming to you for those tattoos because they have wanted it for a long time and other people haven't done it?
Yeah,
and
100%. 100%. I have a lot of people that they've been wanting that for a long time.
Interesting.
And I've been doing a lot that this is the first tattoo they have.
Really? Oh,
I did.
Do you know what? That makes 100% sense. But like, say more about that.
And it's about that is how the real penis tattoos started, where nobody had no tattoos, and the only tattoo was on the. That's fucking sick.
I can and will show you photographs of guys in the 80s and 90s who, if you saw them in their underwear, they had no tattoos, but they're completely covered, penis, balls, asshole, 100% covered under their.
It's very common. Draw the underwear.
Yes, exactly.
Make an underwear, even for women, like the bra, everything done as a tattoo. Yeah. And after you put the underwear on top, and you don't see it. Yeah,
and that goes. I mean, talking about this kind of sexuality, that something goes back to maybe even the 1920s. There are photographs in archives.
Like beginnings. Yeah.
And we've had Paul King on the podcast before, and he pointed out that if you were a gay guy, for example, or a kind of trans person in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you couldn't get your ears pierced, so you pierce your dick.
Yeah.
And getting your dick pierced was less of a deal than getting your ear, and
because it's less
visible,
seeing it.
Yeah,
it's 100%.
Yeah, and I think it's so. I mean, it's all surprising to me, but it is beautiful to hear that is still something that persists even in Berlin, even in the 21st century, that people are like, I want to get tattooed, but I just want it to be on there first.
But you don't see any, like, in the same time, like tattoos in general, they're all the time flowing more to the surface of the body. So
the
why? Because society doesn't look like, what the fuck? Society knows that you're a normal person.
Yeah, and like, it's kind of that thing of, it's now gone the full circle where it's so much more acceptable to be like very visibly tattooed. Like, this is what's transgressive again. It's like back in the 30s or 40s, it's like, I can't get tattooed anywhere or pierce my ears. I'll get my dick pierced, or I'll get like genital tattoos. And now we're in an era where like you can get your face tattooed, hand tattooed, and like no one really blink an eye.
Well, that's a big history. Like, my first tattoo was when I was 16. My father did a consent form. Mm-hmm. And I went and got tattoo when I was 16 and a half, so something like that, between 16 and 17. But I always wanted to have a earring, but they didn't want to. But I didn't want to disappoint them. So the first thing I did when I was 18, I pierced my dick. I did a frenum. I went to the day of my birthday, 6th of May of whatever year. I went down and pierced my dick. And nobody knew. It was my secret. It was amazing. It was amazing. Well, all my friends knew.
But it's also like, on that, it's kind of this like transgressive act of masculinity as well, in the sense that like, getting your like ear pierced like isn't masculine, but getting a tattoo is. And then what can you do against that when you can't get your ear pierced? Is you pierce your frenulum or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. I mean, it's also, my sense about Spanish tattooing in general, right, and Spanish tattoo culture is that it's slightly out of time compared to everywhere else because of the dictatorship. And actually, the story you're describing that's happening in the 2000s is a story that elsewhere in the world was happening in the 60s or the 50s, or for me, I was getting pierced in the late 90s, and it's really kind of exciting and lovely to hear that desire to kind of do something intimate and private but necessary is persistent, and you feel, I mean, as you said, Instagram has certain limits on what you can and can't show, but I feel like you're a real
Twitter doesn't.
Twitter doesn't. Yeah,
Twitter doesn't.
We're not calling it X. But you feel like almost like, and this is why I love talking to you. You feel like a tattooer from another, or not even a tattooer, a kind of person from another age. Like this is a conversation that I could have had with somebody when I was 19, 18, 20. Like you feel like kind of out of time in a really beautiful and important way. Like you're the last sort of surviving remnant.
Well, I had once a vision that in medieval age, but that's too far. I don't know if in between them, it was another one that I didn't visualize yet, but.
Hey, listen, as anyone who's listened to this show would know, you were having these conversations when you were 19 online.
This is what I mean. Yeah, exactly. This is what I mean. Like, as someone who also, had genital piercings and had genital mods and we talked to Sean Porter as well. There was a lot of, Sean Porter said to us when he started running BME Hard, right, in the late 90s, it was old guys getting their dicks pierced. And by the time he finished doing it in the 2010s, it was young guys getting their faces done. Like the kind of secret, private, intimate genital stuff is actually where, again, to think about the history of the industry, the tattoo industry changes because people who are doing weird dick stuff get interested in it in the 60s and 70s. It's true. But as you said, it's been taboo. No one's really wanted to talk about it openly, although everyone in the industry who knew what they were doing knew what was going on. And you feel that this kind of real old soul ad, you're an interesting tattooer from another era in a way. I can't think of anyone else. Maybe there are other people that you can name check, but you're doing something.
I know one in Sweden, Toka.
Yeah,
he does massive but very bold, Scandinavian patterns. Yeah, very very bold and very heavy stuff, full black dicks, full gland black, full balls, very heavy stuff. But for me, it's too brutal.
Yeah.
I wanted something. What I wanted is something elegant beautiful. And exactly beautiful.
But that's what I was going to ask, as well as I suppose, where are kind of the outer limits of what you can actually do with genital tattooing? It's like you said, fully black balls, fully black dick. Where does it kind of stop with what you can do and what?
I never tried. I don't know, but I don't know. I never tried fine line. I don't know if with a single needle. I don't know.
Well, that's what Sebastian did fine line stuff.
I think it got a little number, letter, a little face of a dragon, something with fine line. It could look good, but technically, I don't even know how to do it on an arm.
Yeah, hey, listen. Now you can get 3 black and grey sleeves.
Yeah, exactly. Anything bold, throwing lines. Yeah.
So who's your average customer? Is it someone older, younger? Older. Yeah.
Well, it's I think it's or very young or more than after 40s. Yeah. 45, 50 or between 20, 25. Yeah, very young people too.
Any really
and both heterosexual people, homosexual people, anything. And people that comes with the boyfriend, people that comes with the girlfriend to help them if they need to get hard to put the stencil. There is kind of a process that, or some people that it need some support.
Do you presumably have some customers who, for them, the process itself is sexual?
Yeah, it happened. It happened before some people getting excited.
Yeah.
First, there is some people that got excited while I was putting the stencil, for example. There is some people that got excited while I was tattooing.
Yeah.
So that the dick was flat and soft. And when I started doing it, got hard.
Yeah.
Because he was excited.
Yeah.
Even like pre-com, pre-cum or whatever it calls. I don't know, like.
So yeah, because Sammy Stewart and Phil Sparrow talks about that some of his clients would come because the act of being tattooed was for themselves sexual, whereas for like someone like Sebastian, he would say that for him, he was sexually attracted to tattooed guys, but he didn't find the act of tattooing men.
Well, many of
attractive.
them they think I'm homosexual,
right?
And many of them they come with a vibe of like trying, I guess, to flirt or something. No,
of course.
It's a free wall, no? So I understand or I respect because I did it too.
Yeah.
But not in a professional way or not in. I don't go that and I do this in the dentist or. When they're gonna take me blood, you have another attitude. But tattoo again is mixed in society in a place where people it's a happy place. People does whatever they want. It's like a kind of a jungle, and I don't think it's cool because it needs to have the same respect,
And like, where do you then set the boundaries as the tattoo artist when you're doing that process of doing the tattoo?
At the moment, I didn't have any situation where I had to put boundaries, to be honest. I didn't born yesterday, so I can see from a little bit far away if this is it's with a bad intention or is without respect. You can carry things on with a funny way or like just joke. I don't know. You can sense which is the vibe of the situation. And if I don't feel comfortable, of course I'm gonna say it. Everybody have a price, yes, but I'm not stupid or I don't want to feel like used. No, in this case.
At some point, it's kind of like you sense the way the situation is going, and it's like, okay, I'm just checking out now. It's like I'm not doing anymore.
Yeah, it didn't happen at the moment, but it could happen, and I will do it. Of course, if I feel that it's going too far, of course. It's like anybody at work. Like the thing is that because you have that thing on your hand, it's the barrier. The barrier is just so thin that some people can have a mistake between one side or the other one, and I understand, and I'm not. You have to do a lot to piss me off.
Yeah, and it creates this interesting question of like, where is the line in terms of like, there will be a certain amount of people that like the tattooing itself is the sexual experience. It doesn't really matter where it's happening on the body, and specifically people who like the genital tattooing is the sexual experience. Is like, where's the difference there between like the people who are enjoying it on a place that's more acceptable versus like when it's a much more intimate area?
Yeah, I don't know.
No, that's totally fair.
I don't know because I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question.
I think what I like about your approach as well, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because it is obviously like it is taboo and it is kind of edgy, but it's you treat it so seriously, and like the work is so beautiful, and as you said,
but in the same time, could be a sexual tattooing in the inner thigh, could be a sexual tattoo in the butt, could be. It could be sexual tattoo anywhere.
Yeah,
if you're attracted to the person that you have in front, no. The situation is that just keep barriers, and any place you will keep them. So yeah, I think anything can be sexual, and you can find bad experience or awkward situations in any way. But of course, in there, it can happen more because it's a private place and it's a new place, and people need to get used to it, I guess. But I think it's something coming, and I think.
So I suppose then, as probably a point to wrap up on, if someone is listening and they want to get their boyfriend a dick tattoo, what would you recommend they look up in terms of like, here's a beautiful gift for my lover, or you are wanting to get a bit of a surprise for your lover and get a fresh dick tattoo for Valentine's Day?
That's an amazing idea. I think it's a beautiful idea. Of course, it's something that you have to test months before. Talk about the situations like, I saw this guy doing dick tattoos, what do you think? If the person say no, fuck this shit, you will not do this present, no? But I think it's a very amazing and very romantic, because both they will not. It's going to be enjoyable because I'm sure for both will be exciting. Yeah.
And I think as well, it's not really a decision you will take lightly in the same way as a lot of people who will get someone's name tattooed on their arm or something.
I do that.
It's a lot harder to cover up, but I feel like, if you're going to do it, you're going to be serious about it.
100%. You just have one dick. At least you have 2 arms.
Okay. Tom, what did you make of Ad and that chat? I really, really enjoyed talking with him.
I really enjoyed it as well. It was it's very interesting to hear him speak about something that, like, he does like a lot of black work, a lot of what people would consider a kind of a Berlin black work style, which, like, for a lot of people might be, oh, that's the far extreme of tattooing. But for, those in the know, it's like, well, below the belt is not necessarily extreme in the way you think of it. And I was kind of shocked that he said that it actually isn't as painful as people say it is.
Yeah, I think, this is something that you might imagine was very, very painful, but he has a very kind and gentle manner as well. And, it's something that, that it seems, he says is, much, much less painful than people imagine. And like it's something which, he's very proud to be doing. And it's, as he says, it's part of his own kind of sexual identity, and it gives him a really particular take on what it means to be a tattooer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for listening to this episode of Beneath the Skin. As always, I've been Tom and it's been Matt. We're on the free feed, and we also have a Patreon. If you enjoy the show and you like episodes like this and you want to hear them early, you want to hear more, you want to support the show for as little as £3 a month, you can do all of that. And if you support at some of the higher tiers, you get some extra bonus stuff. At £10, you get a shout out. £15, you get a signed copy of Matt's book. Depending on what time you're listening to this, it could be one book, it could be a different book.
Well, the next book's not coming out for a while, so for the moment, Painted People, but we'll keep people posted.
And for anyone listening, at the time of release, we will be at Brighton Tattoo Convention, booth 109 in the big room, on the 24th and 25th of February. Come chat to us. We'll have some cool stuff for you to look at, some cool stuff that you might want to buy, and what Brighton's own Sammy Hellride will be tattooing designs out of Jesse Knight's best of book.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And so, without further ado, it's to thank the £10 and above tier patrons. That is Stephen McCann, Roy Hoxema, Morpheus Ravenna, Chris Block, Charlie Lightning, Bob of Extra, Shit Jesus, Reed Ford, Lupe Calderon, Garnica, Kirsten Wright, Kathleen Burkhardt, James Schick, and Dylan. And I want to thank you for listening. If you can't support the show, maybe leave us a review, share an episode with your friends.
Bye.
Bye.